At you. Triple header today. 2 o'clock to King's Court. I did a show at 5, and here we are at 8 o'clock Pacific. How are you, buddy?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Not bad. Been watching any of the Olympics?
I have here and there certain sports, and then some that I've been a little curious about. How about you?
Not much. Not much. I did watch the opening ceremony, and I understand the backlash and the outrage. I mean, the Olympics to me have gotten off kilter. They really have. It's almost like trying to outdo the Joneses. Like every
No
Olympiad
doubt.
now, you've got to do something that you think is going to be the greatest of all time, better than the last Olympiad, and it's like everyone's trying to outdo each other. The amount of money that's being spent is ridiculous. I thought Celine Dion's, I think her singing at the Eiffel Tower for me, was the best part of the opening ceremony.
Yeah, blew me away. Everything she's been through to be back
I know.
at it, doing it in her home country, absolutely amazing.
In the rain.
In the rain. That being said, you forget that it's the Olympics with the opening ceremonies.
I
I
know.
remember the days where each country walked into the
Yep.
stadium holding their flags. You're celebrating the athletes. You're talking
Yep.
about people that are first timers, heroes, yada,
Yeah.
yada, yada. And now just a boat
It's a
sailing
joke.
by. Hey, team this, team that. It's a parade more than anything else.
It's unbelievable. And there's some things that have happened already in this Olympics that have turned me off. I did a rant on this last week.
Yeah.
About some of the things, the cheating that's gone on already by the coach of the Canadian women's soccer team, right?
Yep.
You had a very well-known Olympic champion, household name in the UK. Forgive me right now, I don't know the name, in the equestrian. Basically kicked out of the Olympics when a very disturbing video surfaced of her whipping a horse. She's one of the most decorated Olympic athletes in the history of the UK, and actually was projected to become the most decorated Olympian in the history of the UK. Out. The treatment and what's going on when the Israeli national anthem is played is appalling. It is appalling. And the fact that that is allowed to go on in the stadium without those individuals being barred and kicked out is beyond comprehension. Could you imagine if during a national anthem of, pick any country you want, but let's particularly keep it to a country in Africa, okay? Yeah. Which is predominantly a Black community in all the countries there, right?
Sure.
Correct?
Yep.
Could you imagine if you had a group of fans standing up, denouncing the national anthem, and chanting the N-word over and over again? Could you imagine that? You're telling me that in 2024, at the Olympic Games, we can have a section of fans with Palestinian flags chanting Heil Hitler? Really? Like, what kind of world are we living in? Seriously, what kind of world are we living in? And there have been other examples already in the Olympics that have left a sour taste in my mouth. And I think it's a shame because 99% of the Olympics is great with athletes that have really dedicated their entire life to get to this pinnacle.
Yeah.
And that's what we're dealing with. I mean, it's just flat out disgusting to me.
It's hard to conceive that we go through the trouble we do to make sure that the perimeters are secure, to make sure it's a safe place without weapons, yet words, yet actions can sometimes speak louder than actions. And it's just as bad. I mean, the opening ceremony for me, there were parts of that set kind of that tone where it's like, all right, it's a little bit of, I mean, parts, Grant, I'll be quite frank, I was offended. And it had nothing to do with race. It had nothing to do with gender. I was offended. And so if that's okay.
What do you tell your son if he's watching the opening ceremonies with you with the one skit? I mean, how do you explain that to a young individual? I mean, it's just like, why is that on our primetime television in America
worldwide
or any other country in the world?
You turn it off. And that's actually the worst part. You turn it off and you have to have a conversation about something that comes once every 4 years. Son, this is the Olympics. This is games that have been played since ancient days back in Athens, in Greece. And then we shift to a topical problem that's on our TV waves most every day of the week. It's bad. It is what it is.
And again, it really is a shame because it detracts from what the real purpose of the Olympics is.
No doubt.
And that's competition. All right. So I want to get to USA and Serbia. Maybe they don't win that game without Kevin Durant. And I was pretty strong on this last week. Why is Durant still on the team? I think, and I said, in order for this to look good for Grant Hill, he's going to have to play very well in the Olympics and not be hurt. I mean, you can't play any better than Durant did in the game against Serbia.
23 and 17 minutes changed the trajectory of that game. Nobody could guard him. But yes, without Durant, some of those concerns are still there, Grant. 17 turnovers. They've been turning the ball over a ton. And we know the international game is a lot about the big men, Napes. And our big men, Bam Adebayo, Joel Embiid, 4 points apiece, didn't play particularly great. So if
the game USA, was 3-point shooting, Ryan, it was
exactly.
Just look at the 3-point shooting.
I was just going to say, if USA can shoot 56% from beyond the arc, they're going to win the gold medal every game.
Of course they are. Of course they are. They're supposed to win the gold medal. They're the overwhelming favorite coming in. And listen, I know a lot of people are making a big deal that Jason Tatum didn't play. You know what? It's the Olympics, and they won the game, and he'll be playing. And, it's not like you can play everyone. Jerry Reynolds had the line that I always use all the time years ago, when fans were talking about an individual not playing. He goes, hey, it's not Little League Baseball. Not everybody gets to play 3 innings.
Yeah, especially in a team like this, when you're surrounded by future Hall of Famers, top 10s of all time. It's a matchup thing. Steve Kerr even acknowledged it. And with the next game Wednesday coming up against South Sudan, Jason Tatum's going to be getting plenty of playing time, but that's for the team to figure out. That's not our problem. Let them handle it.
Yep. So, again, I'm not bothered by it. I think, again, both the women's and the men's teams should be standing on the podium with gold around their necks. I think the women are like 56 or 57-0, with their record. They've won 6 or 7 straight Olympic gold medals. I mean, I just don't see them being touched at all in the Olympics. I think they're going to cruise.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they're going to cruise as well. This Caitlin Clark thing, it's going to be a non-story. I think we're on the same page.
Correct. Totally agree with you. All right, we have a show where you can go in any direction you want. Ryan has put the link up on the chat, and you have the QR code that you can click on as well. There it is, the link. So all you got to do is click on that if you want to come on the program, and we can talk about that. So a lot of different ways we can go here. There's the baseball trade deadline. We've already had some bad injuries. Pass rushers, man. Dallas out. Indianapolis, leading sack man from last year, out with an Achilles, right? Williams of the Cowboys, ACL, out for the year. This happens every year, and you just hold your breath. And there's just, you just hate to see this. I mean, in freaking July, you just see guys going down and lost for the year. It's awful.
Yep, it is. And unfortunately, this is when those guys get their reps, Grant. This is it. They don't usually play a ton in the preseason games. Don't know how you fix it, short of putting them in bubble wrap. But a lot of the injuries, as you said, non-contact, but changes the odds for a lot of these teams.
All right, I talked about Jordan Love now with a $55 million a year contract, 4 years, $220 million. He had a really good second half of the season. He had 15 or 20, I think it was 15 touchdowns and 1 interception over the last 8 weeks. Yep. Played very well in the win against Dallas. I get all of that.
Yeah.
But based on that, he's now the highest paid quarterback in football. The NFL structure in terms of salaries for the quarterback is so out of whack. It is so out of whack. It really is.
Yeah, and that's why you see teams that if you make the wrong decision and pay the wrong guy, you can set your franchise back. You're done. Exactly right. Your Kansas Cities, your other teams that are balanced. And don't get me wrong, Mahomes making a lot of money, but they're
Yes.
still able to keep a balanced roster. I guess, Grant, when you do what Green Bay does and you sit a quarterback strategically behind a veteran, you are almost making
Yes.
the commitment to that player because you're
Yes.
only going to have a year of work to show for it
They
outside
did
of
the
what they're
same thing
doing.
with Aaron Rodgers.
It's what you see in practice almost more than you see in the
Yeah.
games. And I know he had 32 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, but
Yeah.
55 million, man.
It's also a great example of how throwing a young quarterback into a pack of wolves is not always the best thing. Now, again, Aaron Rodgers, great example. Jordan Love has looked good and appears to be another good example of how beneficial it can be not to get the keys to the car when you walk into an NFL locker room if you're the number one pick, such as a Caleb Williams or a Baker Mayfield or a Sam Darnold or a Zach Wilson, and we can go on, right? I mean, now there
Certainly.
are quarterbacks that have come in their first year, CJ Stroud last year being a perfect example of that have succeeded. But there are many others that have not, and you just wonder if maybe being on the sideline for 2 or 3 years might not be a bad way to go. Look at what Atlanta's doing. They have Kirk Cousins on a big deal coming off an injury. They spent a first-round pick on a quarterback. But if Cousins plays well, that quarterback's not getting on the field.
No, Penix will be on the sidelines learning,
right?
Which, as you've said,
yeah,
not a bad thing.
Sorry, finish.
Not a bad thing. But again, that's where the practice comes into everything. You've got to be confident about that player, about what you're seeing in practice, and you're going all in. And that's part of the reason Love is getting paid this way. And to your point about the guys that get thrown into the fire and don't succeed at first, we're seeing a generation now that are getting second chances and are being paid well. Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, those guys are getting their market's worth. And I think they're fair numbers for them.
It's a great point. The question is, will we be saying the same thing in a year or two about Sam Darnold or Zach Wilson, right? I mean, will they ever get an opportunity? So the next big deal that's going to be worth noting is Brock Purdy, because his body of work deserves a contract just like Jordan Love. I mean, how could you argue with what Brock Purdy's done?
Wouldn't you say he deserves maybe 10, 20% more than Jordan Love?
Yes.
Absolutely. But you got to think the Niners are already calculating and trying to figure that out as they look at possible extensions for Ayuk, possible Trent Williams extensions, because at some point they're not going to be able to pay everyone.
All right, let's get to some phone calls.
Let's do it. Let's kick it off with Gammon. Welcome in tonight.
How's it going, gentlemen? Not too much.
How are you?
Good. I was going to do my 3-question Tuesday tomorrow, but I decided to call in today because I have some scheduling conflicts, so we had to kind of move it up here.
All right.
So I just want to start off with this doesn't really count for a question, but just wanted to say, knock, knock.
Who's there?
Yeah.
Yahoo.
Yeah, guys, I'm excited for his 3-question segment as well. So let's get rolling here. All right, you guys, you guys are no strangers to the internet, right? The animosity that's there. Grant, you've been doing this for a long time, especially as far as having your own radio show on 1140, having people call in, maybe being angry or maybe even fans being upset when you're at the stadium and that sort of thing, right? But I do have to ask you guys, since you guys are on there and you guys put yourselves out there all the time, what's worse in your opinion? Being trolled by those kinds of people, making those excessive comments or whatnot, or being taken out of context?
Oh, easily being taken out of context. I don't worry about the trolls on the internet. I don't worry about criticism because it comes with the business. And I've never felt that social media is the real life. I don't think social media is very indicative of how the majority of people think. And so I used to, early in my career, I used to be bothered by criticism. And after I was in this business for a couple of years, it really just rolled off my sleeve. And I did not pay a lot of attention to it. I pay attention to criticism from people that are professionals. All right. So, for instance, if I were criticized by a Phil Mushnick a media critic of the New York Post or someone of that magnitude, that would bother me more because it's coming from more of an educational base. However, when you are criticized by a member of the media or by anyone else, that's only one person, right?
Mhm.
I've always had a very simple philosophy in my entire career when I started back in the 80s. The most important person in my life is my employer. Is my employer happy with the job that I'm doing? Because they're paying me. All right. You're not paying me. The internet's not paying me. The newspaper's not paying me. The company that I work for is paying me. So I always had an attitude, regardless of what heat might be coming from the outside, if my employer is happy with me and likes the job that I'm doing, that's it for me. I'm okay with anything else that comes after that.
Fair enough. And I have not been taken out of context in a public forum like Grant is speaking about. Trolls, Gammon, don't bother me whatsoever. I've been a clone for a really long time. In fact, sometimes I have been a troll. So there you go.
Well, I mean, listen, there are people for whatever reason that took all lives matter, every single one, out of context.
Yeah.
I still, to this day in 2024, don't understand how all lives matter, every single one, could be taken out of context. Every single one includes Black people, Jewish people, Muslim people, Hispanic people, all people. All right? Like, how can that be taken out of context? All lives matter, every single one. So, I'm more bothered by people that want to take words and change the meaning of those words, because words have intent, right? When you speak, you have intention, okay? You can misconstrue words, but you need to find out from the individual that's speaking, what did that individual intend with those words? What was the intent? Right?
Absolutely.
And so the people that do not spend 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 30 minutes looking for intent and examining a person's background bothers me not even close compared to what you're referencing via the internet.
Absolutely. Yeah. So all the trolls out there, if you're only tuning in just because you guys want to troll Grant and Ryan, remember, take them out of context, and then that's how you'll get a rise out of these guys right here. That's
Oh, no, you'll get blocked from the channel. You'll get blocked from the channel.
Yeah.
No, I don't put up with it anymore. I don't. Like, on this channel, I've unfortunately had to take a handful of people out of the chat line, not because it bothers me. I believe it's disruptive to the other people on the chat line, and I'm actually doing it for them more than I'm doing it for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, and credit to the chat line and the viewers, because a lot of times the chat polices itself.
Yes.
They will start
Yes.
taking that person out themselves, and not
Amen.
in a rude way. They see it, they call it out. We love them for it.
Spot on. Good question.
Absolutely. Salute to chat. All right. So this one kind of had me thinking, because earlier we kind of had a conversation about the dynamics and how things have changed in broadcasting and this kind of business. And then also too, earlier today in an earlier stream, Grant, you were referencing, you were watching a little bit of the USA Serbian game, I believe. And the announcer, you heard him and you just,
No. It wasn't me. It was a well-known veteran sportscaster who put a post out on Facebook talking about the announcing. And then I read that. It wasn't my opinion. It was based on somebody else and their observation from their seat of an individual that's announced thousands of professional sporting events in their life. But go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Excluding Kyler Murray, every athlete, right, watches their own film to improve, and also a lot of times watch film game of other players and starts to model their game or borrow some of that style from another athlete and incorporate it into their game.
Yes.
For you guys, as someone, you guys in your professions, how do you watch, break down, assess your performance? Or how did you do it? You know, you guys are probably so polished. You guys probably just hop on here and it's easy. But, you know, how did you do that, right, to kind of foster that self-growth? And then also, too, who was your MJ in your profession? Who did you kind of watch when you were kind of getting into this and say, you know what, that's kind of who I'm going to kind of first start modeling after until I can build up my own kind of style, my own game, and go from
Well, for me, it was Marv Albert. I used to listen to all the Knicks and Rangers game on radio when Marv was doing the Knicks and the Rangers when I was growing up as a kid in the 60s and the 70s. Marv also was the sports anchor on WNBC TV Channel 4 in New York. So he would be doing a Rangers or a Knicks game at the Garden, and 45 minutes later, he'd be on the set at Channel 4 at The Rock in Midtown Manhattan doing the sportscast on the 11 o'clock news. I used to not only listen to Marv, I used to record his games, edit the highlights, and bring them in to let my friends listen to in homeroom the next morning before the bell rang in junior high school. So you got to remember, I grew up in a different era than you guys did.
Yeah.
I didn't have the ability to listen to announcers all over the country because there was no internet and there was very few games that were shown out of market in New York. But I was blessed to grow up in a market that had a variety of teams with a variety of announcers, and I used to listen to them all. Even today, when I watch a game, I'm not only watching a game, I'm also listening to the announcers. I was picking things up even in my 50s from watching games, basketball games, from other announcers saying, I like that. Not that you copy someone's style, but you can copy nuances,
Right?
You know, little descriptions of an area of the floor that maybe I have glossed over. I always tell this. I told Ryan this, and I've told a lot of other people. Peter King, who's had a tremendous career, just retired last year, maybe the most beloved, well-known football writer of his generation. Many, many, many years with Sports Illustrated. Peter was a guy that I have respected so much with his football acumen. Peter King came on my show when I was at KSAC for 1 year in 1994 before I went to KHTK. And I interviewed Peter King. And at the end of the interview, I thanked him for coming on. He said, "Hey, Grant, hang on a minute. I want to ask you a question." I said, "Sure, go ahead, Peter." He said, "Listen, I'm being approached to do TV, and, you know, I'm not really sure. Do you have any advice for me?" And I said, "Yes, I do have advice. Don't let them change you. You need to be Peter King. Don't try to be someone else that you're not. You need to be yourself because the networks will try to change you. Don't allow that." Well, Peter went on and had a tremendous run on NBC, you know, Sunday Night Football in America, among other things. I think I told Ryan the same thing too when he started out. You know, I said, don't try to be Jim Rome, who is his idol. Be Ryan. You know, just like Grant Napier, it doesn't go on the air trying to be Marv Albert or Chick Hearn or Bill King or Mike Breen. I go on the air trying to be Grant Napier. Developing your own style in this business takes years and years. It doesn't happen overnight. It's created, it evolves over time. And then your style is your style. Maybe in the middle of a game, like when I said, if you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball. I didn't practice that. That wasn't rehearsed. That came out one night. Same thing with turn your sprinkler systems on. So-and-so's on fire. Wasn't rehearsed, just came out one night. Then you get feedback from your radio show or the fans saying, wow, you know, I really love that. One of the greatest stories to me, and I hope I'm not going on and on.
No, love it.
My son went to college. He went to junior college in San Diego. And he called me one day, he goes, "Dad, this is unbelievable." I go, "What's that?" He goes, "Well, I was out with all my friends down here in Southern California. And they were asking me about my mom and my dad and what my dad does. And I told them, and they all started saying, oh, if you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball." Not Kings fans, kids growing up in Southern California, okay, that knew my catchphrase. And I was just like, that's unfreaking believable to me. So you develop your style. Ryan is already doing it, and he's way ahead of the game. But Ryan doesn't go on the air trying to be Jim Rome or Grant Napier. He's now being himself. right? Jerry Reynolds doesn't try to be anyone else. Jerry's always been Jerry. That's his personality. You don't change your personality in real life when you go on air. You might, how do
Turn
I
it
want to
up.
say this? You might, like, my radio style in terms of how I talk to people on the radio actually is the same way I talk to people would say, gee, you're crass. I go, you know what? Come play a round of golf with me and my friends. Okay. When I call you a moron on the radio or I call you I call myself that repeatedly all the time. I yell at myself more than I ever yelled at my callers. Same with my friends. They laugh because they know how I am.
Yeah.
I didn't just go on the radio and like act. That's who I am in real life. I've always just tried to be Grant Napier wherever I've gone. And if you're yourself, then that's the way to go.
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't blame you for. I just remember sometimes some callers would call in and they'd want to trade somebody that we had on our bench for another team's like all-star, and you try to slow them down, and they would act shocked and admonish that you didn't agree with them. You're just like, look, and you try to help them out. You're the GM of the other team. Would you do this deal? And they still try to like argue, and you just be like, I can't. And then you start doing your thing. And I was like, I'd cackle, I'd laugh because I'm like, of course, if anybody would do that, we'd all make that trade.
All right, I don't want to put words in Ryan's mouth, but one thing that Ryan did when he approached me, he not only talked to me, he talked to a lot of other people in the business to sit down and pick their brain, right, Ryno?
Yeah, absolutely. And you gave me the time of day. And I would say you'll get them, but those yeses that yet, be ready for them and be on your game. Be ready to show out and know the cities that the people you're talking to are from, like Syosika. What did I say that first time? Syosika. But no, seriously,
not Syosika.
No, I make it because I think that's what I said. Yeah.
I know you are.
But anyways, yeah, it's being ready, asking questions, not the everyday questions. And I think for me, the spontaneity, one of the most surprising things talking to Napes off the air, developing the friendship. Well, what did you do to come up with this? How did you get there? I just did. It just came out. And that told me everything, because just what Grant said, you got to be yourself, turn it up to 10, and just find your way. Still in the research and development stages, but it's a lot of fun. And
so like when I used to fill in for Romy, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't go on the Jim Rome show trying to be Jim Rome or try to, in my mind, I have to appease the clones. No, I didn't go on the show saying I have to appease the clones. I went on to his show saying, I'm going to do my show the way I would do the show anywhere. And they either like me or they don't like me. I'm not going to manufacture stuff just to try to get the clones on my side. And the other part about doing that is when you go on a show that's all over North America, the United States and Canada, you got to know everything. I got to know what's going on in the SEC with the game coming up this week with Georgia and Auburn, or I need to know what's going on with the Toronto Maple Leafs or Vancouver, because as Ryan knows, I used to get calls all the time from people in Canada wanting to talk hockey, and I knew all it. And so, you when you get into this business, and Ryan knows this because I've talked to him, you got to know everything. Like, you have to study, you have to be aware of what's going on outside of your market.
Yep. And outside of your bubble. And that's what I was going to say about the Rome show. You did your show, but you knew Rome show as well. So you were prepared, being prepared, knowing. Yep. Spot on, Napes.
Yeah. And so I really like these questions because I just think just from 6 or 7 questions asking you guys, because I know everyone comes in here and they want to give you this impossible trade, that will never work or go through. But, for me, you've been a legend in my eyes, Grant. So to actually peel back some of that and get some of that history there is, to me,
thank you.
It's amazing. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Doing a great job.
So the last question. So I always like to kind of leave a question that's tough for both you guys to answer. Grant, you said I actually gave you this question. So, but now it's, we gave you about close to weeks. Now you got to come through. So this is going to be it. And then for you, Ryan, I'm excited to hear yours as well. Biggest on-air mistake that you wish you could, Grant, that you wish you could take back, or something you said or did that got you a call from your boss, the big man upstairs. What was it?
I've never said or done anything on the air that has gotten me a call from the boss. other than one time when I went on ESPN radio after the Kings after they lost a big game, and the person interviewing me referenced Chris Webber as a superstar. I said, well, Chris is not a superstar. He's an all-star.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Chris is very sensitive. Chris is very sensitive. So he got very upset that I was on national radio answering a question and correcting the guy saying Chris is not a superstar. And then he runs to Jeff Petrie, and Jeff calls me up. And I said, Jeff, all right, I got you, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And so Chris was upset. So I'll never forget this. Chris is like, bent out of shape, wants me fired, blah, blah, blah. I'm standing outside the arena, just got off the bus in Orlando. Beautiful day. It's the middle of winter. It's 80 degrees. And my phone rings, and I look down, and it's Joe Maloof.
Oh.
Joe's on the phone with me with Gavin in a conference call. And they go, Grant, listen, we're just calling to say we love you. Don't worry about what you said on ESPN radio. Chris just gets a little over, sensitive, and we know how you are, and you do a great job for us. We don't want you to worry about this. Go have a great game tonight. Right?
There you go.
And I was just like, those are great freaking owners. I go, I appreciated that phone call so much from them. And, Chris used to come on. A lot of people don't know this. Chris came on my radio show every week. Every week we had the Chris Webber show.
The Chris Webber show.
And it wasn't just all flowers and ice cream. And I asked him tough questions, and I asked him questions that the fans wanted me to answer. Now, Chris had a tremendous career in Sacramento. So it's not like I didn't think Chris played well. Chris was a legendary player for Sacramento.
Sure.
But he didn't play well in the playoffs. And I pointed that out every year on my radio show because that's my job. I didn't make it up. That's factual. All right. He didn't play in the postseason the way he did in the regular season. Some players are like that. Some players play much better in the postseason than they do in the regular season.
Yep.
Why is that? I don't know. That's just the way it is, right?
Playoff Rondo.
Well, look at Eli Manning in the playoffs.
Sure.
I mean, Eli Manning in the 2 Super Bowl runs only threw 1 interception, and the 1 interception bounced off Stephen Baker's hands into a defender of Tampa Bay. That's the only interception he threw in 2 years of playoff football.
Incredible.
Right? And he was great.
Speaks.
And he was not only good, he was great. He wasn't necessarily great during the regular season, but he was great in the playoffs. Why is that? Some people just live for the moment, and then other people melt in the moment, right? Well, don't we talk about that all the time? The players that, look at Dak Prescott. He doesn't play in the postseason the way he does in the regular season. And there are many others that are like that.
Yep. James Harden, many other guys. I think you had an interesting line to go. And it was not every radio host is also employed by the team. And you and I have talked about this. How do you navigate that? I know that's probably something Gammon's wondering.
You have to walk a very fine line. I'll tell you, you know how many times Gary Gerald would walk on the airplane and go, Napes, I don't know how you do it, man.
Yeah.
He would say that to me. Napes, I don't know how you do it. He goes, I listens to you on the air. I don't know how you do it. He goes, I couldn't do it. Jerry Reynolds, Napes, I don't know how you do it. They go, I don't know how you do it. And there were times when I didn't know how I did it either. It's very difficult to be the announcer of a team and have a radio show. Ryan, you know this about me, and I'm not going to mention names. There's a lot of vanilla on the radio station that I used to work for.
Yes.
There's a lot of vanilla. There's a lot of cupcakes on the air. That's why they keep on rotating host all the time. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're cupcakes. They don't have a backbone, and they're not opinionated.
Too much
and so
sugar.
They can't stay on any time slot for more than a couple of months, and they get moved around or they got taken off because they're cupcakes. The audience doesn't want cupcakes on the air. The audience wants someone that is not afraid to speak the truth and not afraid to criticize when criticism is justified.
Right.
When you're a professional athlete and your job is to entertain and you're making millions of dollars and people are paying their hard-earned money to come watch you and watch on TV and listen to the radio, you're fair game. criticism comes with the territory. Just like me being a public figure and speaking for a living, I'm open for criticism too, because that's the nature of the business. If I don't want criticism, then I need to find a different line of work. I've always thought the same thing about players. And I'll tell you a story once. We're in Boston, and things were the lowest I've ever remembered when Pete D'Alessandro was the general manager.
Tough times.
It was awful. It was absolutely awful. It was the down point. Tyrone Corbin had just taken over.
Mm-hmm.
Ty, by the way, is one of the true great people I've ever met in my life. Forget about basketball. Just as far as a human being, I met him when he played with Sacramento back in the 80s. Love the man. If Ty Corbin called me right now and said, I need you to do something, I would say, Ryan, I got to go. Got to go. That's the type of person Ty Corbin is. Tyrone Corbin was in an impossible situation. The locker room was absolutely destructive and lost, and the fans knew it because the fans were calling my show, talking about it.
Right.
Okay? Something had happened, and I can't remember exactly what, that was very bad and a horrible reflection on the Kings. And I thought Pete D'Alessandro was largely responsible. I'm in the taxi at 8:45 at night, or whatever the hell time it was. 5:45, whatever, 5:45, because the show starts at 6 Boston time. I get caught in traffic. I run up to the studio in Boston. I'm in the elevator thinking about, I don't really know what I'm going to say today. This is the worst this has ever been in Sacramento. The fans deserve better. And I run into the studio. The guy says, okay, you're here. Here's your mic. Here's your return. I said, hey, thank you very much. Music starts playing in my ear. The Grant Napier intro.
Time to go.
I'm sitting there listening to the intro, and I got my eyes closed. I'm like this. And I'm like, okay, here we go. And, you know, I don't write anything down. I don't have anything scripted.
Yep.
I just start talking. I didn't raise my voice. I just talked. And I started off by saying, you know what? You Kings fans deserve better than this. What's going on right now is an embarrassment. It is an outrage. And you, as a fan, need better. You should not put up with this. What's gone on with the general manager is disgraceful.
Mm-hmm.
And I went on and I talked for 22 minutes before I went to my first break. Okay? 3.5 hours of nonstop calls, thanking me, saying, Grant, you said exactly what it needed to be. 3.5, no guests, straight calls.
Yep.
We're playing the next day. It's New Year's Eve. It's either a noon or a 1 o'clock start, and we're flying to Detroit right after the game. I get a call. I'm not going to mention the name. I get a call from a high-ranking official with the Sacramento Kings.
Of course.
He said, hey, Grant, Pete is just unbelievably pissed at you, blah, 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 blah. And he's saying, you know, based on your radio show yesterday. And I said to this individual, I said, did I say anything that wasn't true? He said, no. I said, did I say anything that people don't already really know? He said, no. I said, so Pete can be upset as much as he wants. I'll talk to Pete. Everything will be fine. And I always took the early bus to the games because I always like to get to the game and get early. This is no kidding. I stand on the court. I'm standing on the court in Boston on the famed parquet.
Yep.
The second bus arrives. Pete D'Alessandro comes running onto the court and starts screaming at me on the court and cursing at me. I go, Pete, get a hold of yourself here. Do you see everybody staring at us right now? I go, you want to talk to me like a man? Let's go up into the stands. No fans had been in yet because they weren't in Boston. You come in an hour before the game.
Gotcha.
Pete starts telling me this stuff that I was saying on the radio. I go, hey, Pete, did you listen to what I said on the radio? He goes, no, I was given a transcript. I go, you were given a transcript. I go,
By
Pete,
who?
I go, why don't you do me a favor, Pete? I go, why don't you promise me that you will listen to what I said, and I bet you will have a completely different opinion, okay,
Yep.
of what actually I said. This has just been after Michael Malone had been fired, by the way. That's what it was. Michael Malone had just been fired.
Got it.
All right, so fast forward now. An hour, 15 minutes later, I'm standing on the court with Jerry Reynolds. Jerry can back this up. You can ask him about it on the show.
All right.
New Year's Eve, Boston. I have 3 assistant coaches come up to me and go, hey, man, we really respect the hell out of you for what you said on the radio. Thank you very much. Rudy Gay comes up to me and goes, hey, man, that was freaking awesome. Thank you. And Rudy says, and I want to let you know, all the guys in the locker room, thank you too.
Wow.
I had 2 other players come up to me on the layup line and pat my back and go, good job. Okay?
Wow.
We fly to Detroit after the game. Pete's not on the flight. He's going somewhere else. After the Detroit game, we had a couple of days off before Cleveland, and I drove down to see Scott Pollard in Indiana. Okay? I get a call from Michael Malone. And Michael calls me and he goes, hey, I just want to say something to you. He goes, I just listened to what you said on the radio. And he goes, my phone's been blown off the hook. And he said, hey, man, I just want to just thank you so much for your support. He goes, I will never forget it. He goes, I will never forget that you told exactly what happened and how wrong this is that I got fired. And he said, and I'll tell you, to this day, when Michael Malone sees my son who works for the Kings, he says, hey, make sure you tell your dad I said hello and how much I miss him. All right.
Incredible. Yeah.
I sent Michael a congratulations text after they won the championship. And he said, hey, Grant, that means the world to me. You know how I feel about you. I hope you're doing well. Okay.
Yep.
So, like, you wouldn't have had anyone else on the radio station in Sacramento do what I did.
Not a chance.
Right? But and if I had lost my job for that, I would have been able to go to sleep at night. Because you know what? You know this, and I know this more than anyone else in the world. The one thing that I always cared about more than anything when I was on the radio every day were the fans.
Yeah.
I was not going to allow the fans to be sabotaged. I was not going to allow the fans to be screwed over. And I was never going to lie to the fans about the important stuff that they needed to hear. Wasn't going to do it. I had to go to sleep at night. I had to be able to look in the mirror. There's no way I'm going on a 50,000 watt station in Sacramento, voice of the Kings or not voice of the Kings, and lie to the fans. Never lied to them.
No, you laid it out, whether good or bad. And a lot of times you let them speak, you listen. Not a lot of radio hosts do that. And that's why that line is so interesting. And you navigated it very, very well. The Pete situation, you can't think you can't get your phone number, Grant. I mean, you're going to come on the court and start jumping up and down.
It was embarrassing. And I'll tell you, I had a lot of people looking at me and they were just like, and I didn't even, I said, Pete, I'm like, Pete,
come on,
Pete, stop it. Like I had to calm the guy down and go, come talk to me like a man instead of a child on the court. Pete, I'll tell you, Pete D'Alessandro was the worst thing that ever happened to the Sacramento Kings. You know, people can talk all you want about not drafting Luka or this trade or that trade.
Yeah.
Now, the worst thing that ever happened to the Sacramento Kings was Pete D'Alessandro.
There's been stories out there. That's a hell of a story from you.
You have no idea. It was so bad. The first thing that Pete did when he came in, he fired half the staff without interviewing them or anything. He just kind of took, names and said, you're gone. People that have worked at the Kings for 20 years, gone before Pete even shook their hand or talked to them.
Yeah. Sometimes people think they're bigger than the organization. And it's unfortunate. The fact that players came up to you, that's the thing. You're not a national media guy, Napes. You're not here for the national TV game and spew. You're part of the family. Yep. You're with them. You're on the planes. You're in the practices. So if it's coming from you, it's not coming from a bad spot, or at least as a professional, that's how I'd see it, as long as you're not being offensive. as long as you're not being disrespectful. You're all family trying to make it better. Some people don't handle it better or well.
And I had the respect. I think I had it before then.
Sure.
But standing on the court that day, to have 3 assistant coaches,
incredible,
and a couple of players, and Rudy Gay saying, "Hey, man, the locker room, they have your back 100%."
Incredible.
He goes, "Thank you." He goes, "Thank you," because they all knew that Michael Malone getting fired was an absolute outrage and a disgrace. Everyone on that team loved Michael Malone, and they loved playing for him. And Pete D'Alessandro stabbed him in the back. And when they fired a coach that everyone loved, that locker room was a disaster. And I let it settle for a little bit, and then I'm like, can't do it anymore. It was the low point. It was so bad. The players didn't want to come to work. They didn't want to play. It had nothing to do with Tyrone Corbin. Nothing.
And that is the little things. Talk about navigating the line. That is it right there to a T. That might be one of the best stories I've ever heard from you. Got to be honest.
C-Dog says Rudy Gay hated his time in the Kings. What was the problem? GM and owner? No, the problem was DeMarcus Cousins. He hated playing with DeMarcus. He said it was impossible. Wasn't the coach, wasn't a GM. It was DeMarcus Cousins.
And Rudy was also on record saying that the coach was fired shortly after he re-signed, being told the coach would be there.
Yep. I love Rudy. You know, Rudy to me got a lot of unfair criticism. Rudy was a very talented player, played, hard every night, was very upset when they lost. I have a lot of respect for Rudy Gay. All right. Yeah. Hey, before we move on, I want to tell you about some of our outstanding sponsors and New Works Plumbing. They've got a fix for you. They are available around the clock, 24/7 for all of your plumbing needs and repairs. Just call that number on your screen or go to sackserviceplumbing.com. They've got a fix for you. That's New Works Plumbing. We're also brought to you by Bennett's, Sacramento, Roseville, and the West Side Grill in Rockland. Prime seafood and steak. Don't forget about their happy hours, sips and tastes from 2 to 6 each and every day. Their weekend brunch. It is outstanding. That's Bennett's, the West Side Grill in Rockland, or the Roseville or the Sacramento location, Howe and Fair Oaks. It is outstanding. And I will be there in a couple of weeks, and I cannot wait. Go to Bennett'sRestaurants.com for more information. That's Bennett'sRestaurants.com. So back to what I was saying. And you know me, I don't really talk about I don't brag. I don't do anything like that.
Yeah.
But G-Man and Jerry Reynolds used to come up to me all the time and go, Napes, I have no idea how you do this. Like literally. And when the team's playing well and they're winning, it's easy. Right?
Yeah.
But when things are going bad and there's turmoil and there's constant criticism, much of which is justified, going on the radio every day sucked. It wasn't fun going on the radio every day and being negative for 4 hours every day. Anyone that thinks that's fun is delusional. That's not fun for me.
Had you not been in this market, had you been in a bigger market, the calls were always such a big part of your show. You rolled a lot of calls, but you had relationships with a lot of the callers that called in. They knew you knew them, etc. Would that have changed market to market? Was it something special about Sacramento where they got a little more rope?
It wouldn't have changed for me. If you listen to Chris Russo on his Sirius XM, he takes calls too. Chris and I believe that the most important part of our show was the audience, and you have to keep the audience happy. And how can you know what the audience is thinking if you don't talk to them every day? My show was not for me. I didn't do the show for Grant Napier. I did the show for you. All right. Well, I need to know what you're thinking. How do you feel? What's bothering you? What do you want to see done? Not just with the Kings, but NFL or what have you. If I don't have the pulse of the fans, like you, how am I going to get the pulse of the fans if I don't talk to them? I need them to call my show and tell me. So I was always, no matter where I worked, I took a lot of calls when I hosted Romy. Romy doesn't take a lot of calls.
No, he does not. This is true.
I did. I took all kinds of calls.
You did. Sometimes even asking callers a question or two.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. Different time, too. You didn't have social media really popping around as much in the early days. So phone call was the vessel.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So
Incredible stuff. Incredible stuff. Good job, Gammon. Good job, Napes.
I have so many stories. I mean, there's so many stories. When you do any broadcaster that's been in this business for as long as I was with a team, there's all kinds of stories. There's all kinds of stories.
And every time we go down this road and a story comes up, which leads to another story, I'm looking at the chat right now. Amazing story, 10 out of 10 story from Napes. It's good stuff. It's a peek behind the curtain. That means a lot to a lot of fans.
Yeah, well, I think that's why I was on the same show in the same time slot on the same station for 27 years.
Yeah. Talk about a grind. To keep your energy that high from 3-4 hours of radio straight into a basketball game, that is not easy.
Again, you have a choice to make, but more than anything else, the biggest choice that I made when I got into this business is I was going to be myself. I wasn't going to try to be somebody that wasn't myself. So how I am on the air is pretty much how I am in real life. Doesn't really change.
Nope, just turned up a little bit, I would say. Sometimes
turned up
a little bit more.
Yes.
Yeah, turn
Yes.
up volume just a tiny bit. Absolutely.
Yep. So I enjoy talking about this stuff when it's brought to my attention because it does make me reflect back on some of the, because he asked me, difficult moments. He didn't say the word difficult. He said something I wish I could take back. I don't wish I could take back that show. I would do the show over again the next day if I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at how much of an impact it had. The players coming up to you, the coaches coming up to you. It's something that you remember. Absolutely. You do that.
Do I ever hit up Pete whenever he's in town to catch up and enjoy a beer and a burger? Pete D'Alessandro? No, I have no respect for Pete D'Alessandro. None. I have zero respect for him. I wouldn't want to be in his presence. I don't want anything to do with him. And I'm speaking for everyone that worked in the Kings organization. Nobody liked Pete. Nobody.
How'd he could land that job?
Do I have any stories about Buddy Hield? We'll save those stories for another day. I love Buddy. Go ahead.
I was going to say, how did Pete land that job, though? Were you a little bit surprised when they named him?
No, because he was hired by an incompetent owner in Vivek Ranadive, who had no idea what he was doing when he bought the team. And his first move was, to hire a coach and then a general manager. And it was backwards. And he hired a guy that he had no business hiring.
Yeah, there's an interesting video, I believe, floating around YouTube of the Kings draft room the year they drafted Nick Stauskas, and it was Vivek largely leading the room as opposed to Pete. So I know a lot of fans have seen that one.
I have a lot of inside information to what was going on at that particular point in time, and I can't really recite the story because I would be breaking trust.
Sure.
But what happened in that war room that day was an embarrassment. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, better times now. Monty McNair turned things around. Vivek probably still meddling a little bit, but I would say probably the most solid base this team's had. You extend a coach, you bring in DeMar DeRozan, you got 2 other all-stars. A lot to be excited about if you're a Kings fan.
Any George Karl and Cousins story. There are many stories. DeMarcus was so disrespectful to George. It was so hard to see. And it was disgraceful. George Karl had no chance when he took over after the All-Star break. He had already been completely humiliated by the Cousins camp. The problem surfaced before they even met. It was awful. George was a dead man walking before he walked into the building.
The one story about DeMarcus, this was on a national level. We've talked about Rome. You remember this, Grant. Rome was here to come see the Golden One Center, sat courtside for the night. And sure, that Sacramento show that he did live from here at 1140 was a big part of the recap. But unfortunately, a lot of it was overshadowed by DeMarcus. The majority of Rome's next show that Monday was taken up about DeMarcus telling a fan to sit their F-ass down and shut the F up. And as a national host, to come get one small sample size of Sacramento and to be putting it over that radio station that is international, as you laid out, it was rough. So I can only imagine what you heard, because I heard that. I was in the building. I was 6 rows away from it.
It was embarrassing because Jason Jones used to cover for him all the time. And I used to go, how would you not put that in the paper? It's public. I'd have to go, well, if I write about it, then, he'll never talk to me again. And he's the best player on the team. And I go, I felt like saying, grow a pair of balls, would you please? Like the stuff that he got away with murder in Sacramento. You think that you don't even know most of the stuff that was going on because it wasn't put in the paper.
Sure. Well, he's starting to tell some more stories on podcasts these days, but old news, on to new.
Well, tomorrow you got your 2:00 show, right?
Jerry Reynolds Tuesday.
I know.
Can't wait, and come join us.
You can ask Jerry about Pete D'Alessandro. I'd love to know what he remembers.
I think I will. I will definitely do that.
You can tell him I relayed the story from that Boston, because Jerry couldn't believe it either. I do want to tell you before we go, though, about Sunrise Landing. And if you go to CalusaSunrise.com, you can check out everything that they have to offer at this beautiful residential community. Many models to choose from. No Mellorews, no homeowners. Don't forget, it's right next to the Calusa Golf and Country Club. Great access to I-5, Highway 45, Highway 20. And if you go to CalusaSunrise.com, you can check out everything. This is Blazona Development. That's what Sunrise Landing is, from Blazona Development. And again, CalusaSunrise.com will get you all of the information that you need. Well, partner, that was a fun show today. I'm sorry that I did most of the talking. I apologize for that.
Hey, that's all right. There's times that you sit back and listen and you learn, and I did that tonight. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate all the nice feedback too on the chat line. It's you know what? There are most of my memories with the Kings are great to very good. Like probably 90% and 10% bad, right?
Yeah.
The team staying, the team leaving, the team staying, the team leaving. I mean, that period of time was very difficult. Dealing with oversensitive drama queens like Chris Webber and DeMarcus Cousins was not easy. It's a shame because they were both supremely talented, but they also were their own worst enemies. And when you see a person that has unlimited potential and unlimited talent not reach the highest of the pinnacle that they could because of their own personality, you go, God, what a shame.
Choices they make. Yeah.
Yep.
No doubt.
All right, buddy. You have a good show tomorrow. And don't forget, Jerry Reynolds on with the King's Court with Ryan tomorrow at 2:00.
Sounds good. You going open forum tomorrow at 5?
I don't know yet. I have a meeting and I need to see what time it's going to end. So it will be not a game time decision, but I'll decide in the morning.
Perfect. Stay tuned. We'll update on the King's Court as well.
All right. To everyone else, appreciate you joining us. Please subscribe. And if you have some friends that don't know about the channel, please pass it along. You get information here that you don't get anywhere else, right, Ryno?
Oh, yes, you do. And it comes out of nowhere.
Yes, we love it. Have a great